Kane Garrett was 39 years old when his wife stood in a room full of people and told them that her new man could beat anyone there, not knowing that the man she was describing had paid Kane $8,400 to teach him how. He drove a 2015 Chevy Silverado with a crack in the dashboard and a passenger side window that stuck in cold weather. He wore plain clothes to most occasions and spoke infrequently at social events, and had the kind of stillness that people who had never seen him misread as quietness. Vanessa's friends called him Steady Kane, meant it as a compliment, and did not know that the steadiness was a thing you learned over 12 years of professional training and 18 professional fights that ended the same way. What Vanessa had told her friends about Derek Sims was that he was exceptional, that he moved with authority, that he was capable and physical and the kind of man who carried himself like someone the room should take notice of. What the client intake form at Garrett Boxing and Athletics showed, filed 8 months before Kane knew Derek Sims existed, was a signature, a training fee of $8,400, and an emergency contact listed under the name V. Whitmore, his wife's maiden name. What Vanessa had never thought to ask, not once in their 6 years of marriage, was where Derek's capability had actually come from, and whose hands had built it. What happened the night Derek tried to demonstrate what he'd learned, in front of the room Vanessa had been preparing for months, was over in 3 movements. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The gym was Kane's best thinking place, and it was at its best before 6 in the morning. He arrived at Garrett Boxing and Athletic on Airways Boulevard most days before the staff, before the first amateur session, before the building was anything other than dim and quiet and smelling of leather and canvas, and the particular sharpness of wrapping tape just cut from the roll. He would walk the space first, check the bags, test the tension on the ring ropes, run a hand along the canvas he had stretched and stapled himself during the last renovation. The ring had been his first major purchase when he opened the facility 9 years ago, and he maintained it the way he maintained anything he had built for long-term use, with regular attention and without waiting for a problem to appear. He had laid that canvas himself with his assistant coach Raymond's help on a Sunday afternoon in November, and he knew every inch of it the way you knew things you had built with your own hands on your own time, for your own reasons. His grandmother, Coretta Garrett, had picked cotton in the Mississippi Delta until she was 22, and then moved to Memphis with $30 and the specific resolve of a woman who had already decided what her life was going to require of her. She had been dead 5 years. She spoke to Kane most clearly in early mornings and in the last seconds before a round started. She used to say, "Baby, real strength is quiet. The loud kind runs out." He had carried that into the ring every time he laced up and carried it out of the ring when he stopped, and it remained the most accurate observation about his profession he had ever heard. Garrett Boxing and Athletic trained professional and amateur fighters, held contracts with 2 Memphis area law enforcement agencies for tactical fitness and defensive tactics instruction, and ran a youth program on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons that Kane had started in his 3rd year of business and considered the best thing the facility did. He had been 18-0 as a professional heavyweight before the hand injury that ended his competitive career, a hairline fracture in the 2nd metacarpal of his right hand that healed insufficiently for the demands of professional competition and sufficiently for everything else. He had been 31 when the career ended. He had taken 6 months to process it, and then opened the gym. Vanessa called it his boxing thing. He had let her. He had met Vanessa Whitmore at a fundraising dinner for the youth boxing program 6 years ago. She had been a corporate donor, composed and precise, with the particular focused attention of a woman who directed her energy intentionally. She had asked him genuine questions about the program over dinner and had followed up with a personal contribution the following week. He had called to thank her. They had talked for an hour. He had liked her directness. He had asked if she wanted to have dinner somewhere that was not a fundraiser. They married 2 years later. The marriage had been purposeful and close in the first years, and gradually less deliberate after that. Not in any argument or crisis, but in the small withdrawals of attention that accumulate into distance when neither person names them. Vanessa had grown more interested in Memphis's social circuit and the company of people whose lives were primarily organized around visibility. She had come to one of the youth program showcases in the gym's second year, had stood ringside and watched the young fighters with genuine attention and asked the right questions afterward, the kind that showed she had been paying attention to what the work was for. He had thought then that she understood. The understanding had not lasted, or perhaps it had been replaced by something she found more useful. She stopped asking about the fighters he was developing. She attended the gym's events as his wife and left early. He noticed. He kept training. On a Thursday morning in October, he was reviewing the following month's private client roster when he saw the renewal request from Derek Sims. He pulled the file. Derek Sims, 37, corporate sales. 8 months of private instruction twice weekly. First 6 months with Kane personally, final 2 months with Raymond as the training load shifted. Fee paid in full. Now requesting a 3-month renewal. Kane reviewed the training log. He had documented every session, progress notes, technical corrections, the specific patterns he had worked to build into the man's movement. Natural athleticism, decent chin, foot speed above average for his size, left hand strong. Persistent problem, dropped the right guard after the jab-cross combination, overcommitted to the left hook when he sensed an opening, would gas in the 4th round if pushed continuously. Kane had worked on all of it for 6 months. Derek had improved measurably. He looked at the emergency contact field at the top of the intake form. V. Whitmore. He set the file down. He looked at the name for a long time in the specific quiet of the office before the gym opened. He picked up his phone and opened the shared account for the car they sometimes traded, a login he had used that morning for a fuel charge. He pulled the recent transactions. A hotel in Midtown Memphis. Last Tuesday. A charge for 2 nights. He set the phone down. He sat with both pieces of information, the hotel charge, the intake form, the emergency contact field, in the specific quiet of a man trained above all other things to see clearly. The picture was complete. It had been complete for longer than he had needed to admit, and he understood that too. A fighter learned early the difference between a thing that surprised you and a thing that confirmed what your instincts had already been preparing you for. He had been preparing for some version of this for months, without knowing precisely what he was preparing for. He moved with the same deliberate calm that had defined his training for 20 years and his preparation for every decision he had made since. He had trained Derek Sims's jab and built his footwork, and corrected his guard and drilled the left hook pivot into him across 12 dedicated sessions, not knowing that the same woman who had referred Derek to the gym was the woman he came home to at night, and the knowledge of that, the full shape of it, settled into him with the weight of something he had actually known for longer than he could have said. He photographed the intake form with the emergency contact visible. He exported the full training log. He pulled the 6-month payment record, $8,400, paid in installments, all documented. He printed a clean timeline, 8 months, 31 sessions. Every technical note he had made about this man's capabilities and limitations, all of it in a file he assembled with the same precision he had always brought to preparation. He called Patricia Odom. Then he called Raymond and told him to close the renewal request. "Client unavailable," he said. Raymond asked no questions. Patricia Odom had been practicing family law in Memphis for 22 years and had the particular unhurried precision of a professional who had seen complicated situations before and had learned to be thorough rather than fast. She reviewed everything Kane had brought: the intake form, the training log, the hotel charge, the emergency contact, and set her reading glasses down. "She referred him to your facility," Patricia said, "before I knew who he was to her. She sent the man she was involved with to be trained by her husband, paid out of her personal account, presumably, since the intake shows the client's own card." Patricia's expression did not change, but something in its quality became more precise. "The emergency contact is her maiden name. She gave him that contact before she told you anything about him. 8 months before." Patricia folded her hands. "Tennessee allows fault-based divorce filings. Documented adultery affects alimony calculations significantly. What you have here is clean and specific." She paused. "I also want to tell you that I ran a preliminary inquiry on the marital asset landscape. Vanessa has consulted a divorce attorney in the past 60 days. The consultation notes I was able to access through a records inquiry suggest she intends to claim the gym's equity growth during the marriage as a partially marital asset. The gym was incorporated before the marriage. I know. Her argument would rest on your labor during the marital period contributing to the business's growth. It's a reach, and the Tennessee courts have been unfavorable to similar arguments in recent years. But she's been building toward a filing." Patricia looked at him directly. She was preparing to leave before you had any reason to suspect she was. He drove to South Memphis that Saturday morning, to a small house on a narrow street where Eddie Weeks had lived for 30 years, with a yard that held a heavy bag mounted to a post Eddie had cemented into the ground himself in 1991. Eddie was 67 and had not trained a fighter professionally since his knees began their own argument with the requirements of the job. But his eye had not changed, and his opinions were the same ones he had arrived at over 40 years of watching men try to become fighters. He had trained Kane from the age of 16. They sat in the kitchen. Eddie made coffee the way he had always made it, strong, no ceremony, and listened without interrupting. When Kane finished, Eddie sat with it for a moment. "She sent him to you," he said. "Her name was on his intake form as emergency contact." Eddie turned his mug in his hands. "So she built him up using your facility, your coaching, your time." He looked at Kane steadily. "And then she put him in front of her friends as something she found." Kane said nothing. "You know what the worst thing about a man who doesn't know his own level is? He doesn't know when to stop. He doesn't know when to stop." Eddie set his mug down. "Sooner or later, someone who does know shows him." His expression did not change. "The only man worth worrying about is the one you haven't trained yet," he said. "Everything else is preparation." By the following Wednesday, Patricia's associate had completed the background review on Derek Sims that filled in what the training file had left open. Derek was 37, regional sales coordinator at a logistics firm in East Memphis, a mid-level position he described on his social media biography as senior sales executive. He drove a leased Audi Q5 that represented his single largest monthly expense after rent. He had been in 2 prior serious relationships in Memphis, both ending within 2 years, both involving some form of financial dispute that had resolved quietly. He posted about fitness frequently, training updates, gym photographs, captions about capability and discipline, none of which named the facility where the training was happening, none of which mentioned a coach. He had been presenting the work as entirely his own. Kane had coached Derek through 31 sessions and had watched his confidence grow with each increment of improvement, had noted with the professional satisfaction he always felt when a student's body began to internalize what it was taught, the real gains Derek had made. He had also noted and documented that Derek's ceiling was not primarily a physical limitation. It was the specific problem of a man who confused capability with identity, who heard correction as attack rather than as instruction, who spent energy defending a level of skill rather than building past it. A man like that improved to a point. Then he stopped improving, and did not know why. His most recent post from 3 weeks prior, a photograph of his own hands wrapped for training. Caption reading the work speaks for itself. 31 recorded endorsements, including one from the account Kane recognized as Vanessa's. Patricia also flagged $2,700 in joint account dining charges that cross-referenced to restaurants near Derek's workplace over the preceding 6 months. Marital waste, documented. Preparation was the work. Kane drove home Thursday evening, cooked dinner, and set 2 plates. Vanessa came in and described a work event she had attended and a colleague she found difficult, and he asked one question and listened to the answer. She mentioned, near the end of the meal, that there was a charity boxing fundraiser on Saturday evening at the Peabody, an event for the Youth Athletics Foundation she had donated to years ago. Derek was fighting in an exhibition bout. She said it might be interesting to watch. He said it sounded like a good event. She had no idea. He went to his home training room after dinner, a spare room with a heavy bag, a speed bag, a mat, and the jump rope he had owned for 15 years. He worked the heavy bag for 25 minutes at a pace he had not touched in some time, moving through combinations he had drilled into Derek Sims across 31 sessions, feeling the muscle memory of each sequence, noticing where the openings were. The dropped right hand after the jab cross, the overcommit on the left hook, the gas tank that ran low in the 4th. He knew this man's game. He had built it. The Peabody Hotel stood on Union Avenue in downtown Memphis with the particular authority of a building that had decided a long time ago what it was and had not reconsidered. The charity boxing event occupied the ballroom on the 2nd floor, an 8-bout card of exhibition matches raising funds for the city's Youth Athletics Foundation, attended by the particular cross-section of Memphis that showed up for events combining charitable purpose with something worth watching. Kane arrived at 7:15 in a dark suit, accompanied by Patricia, at the invitation of the foundation's director, a man named Harold Webb, who had grown up in the youth program Kane ran, and had specifically asked Kane to be present and visible at the event. Harold knew Kane. Memphis's boxing community knew Kane. The room knew him the way rooms know former champions, not loudly, but with a specific attention that moved around him when he entered. He had seen Vanessa's table from the entrance. She was at a round table near the ring with Derek and 6 of their mutual acquaintances from her corporate social circle. Derek was in a fitted blazer, animated, performing the ease of a man in his element. Vanessa was beside him with the composed pride of someone who had arranged something she was enjoying. She had been building toward this evening for weeks, Kane knew, because she had mentioned the event twice at dinner without realizing what she was describing, had invited the specific people she wanted to see this specific man in this specific room, and had told all of them, separately, the same story about Derek's capability. She saw Kane when he was halfway across the room. The animation at the table adjusted. Derek turned to look at the man Vanessa was looking at. Kane reached the table without hurrying. Patricia was beside him. She placed a single document on the table, the Garrett Boxing and Athletic Client Agreement, Derek Sims, 8 months, $8,400, emergency contact, V. Whitmore, and stepped back. The table looked at the document. Derek looked at the emergency contact field. Vanessa looked at Derek. One of the men at the table said, "What is this?" "Derek trained at my facility for 8 months, Kane said to the table. in the even voice he used for things that required no emphasis because the facts were sufficient. I worked with him personally for the first 6. He came in with good athleticism and left with a real foundation. He paused. I know his game thoroughly. Derek stood. He said, "This is not what tonight is." "I know what tonight is," Kane said. Something moved across Derek's face, the specific calculation of a man in front of an audience he had been building for months, deciding whether to perform for it one more time. He had 31 sessions of being made to feel capable behind him. He had Vanessa's confidence in front of him. He had a room watching. He put his hand on Kane's chest. It was not a punch. It was the gesture of a man claiming space, a flat-handed push that was meant to establish distance and authority and move the situation in the direction Derek preferred. Kane caught Derek's wrist with his left hand, stepped off the line, redirected the extended arm across the body using Derek's own momentum, and walked him 3 controlled steps into the nearest wall. Derek's face was against the surface. His arm was at an angle that permitted no leverage and no resistance. He was completely stopped. The room was absolutely silent. Kane held the position for 2 seconds. Then he released the wrist and stepped back and put both hands at his sides. Derek turned slowly. His expression had moved somewhere it had never been in 31 training sessions. Kane looked at him. "You dropped the right hand after the jab cross," he said. "I told you that in week 2. You never broke the habit." He looked at Vanessa. She was still. The composure she had carried into the room was gone, and what was under it was something smaller and more honest. "Real strength is quiet," Kane said. "My grandmother said that. I always believed it." He picked up the client agreement from the table. He buttoned his jacket. He turned and walked toward the exit, through the quiet room, and past the ring, and past Harold Webb, who stood at the edge of the floor with the expression of a man who had just seen something he would be describing for a long time, and who understood that the appropriate response was to say nothing. Kane walked out into the Union Avenue night. The river was 2 blocks away, and the air had the weight of it. He stood for a moment on the sidewalk and breathed it in. He had not lost his temper. He had not raised his voice. He had not hit a man who was not hitting him. He had ended a situation that was started by someone else, and had done it with the minimum force the moment required, and without leaving anything in the room that required his continued attention. He drove home. 6 months later, Garrett Boxing and Athletic added its 3rd law enforcement training contract, a new partnership with the Shelby County Sheriff's Office that expanded the facility's tactical instruction program and added 2 new full-time staff. The divorce had been finalized 8 weeks prior. Patricia's preparation had been, as always, thorough. The fault-based filing had been supported cleanly by the hotel charge documentation, the training client connection, and the emergency contact record, a detail that had required no interpretation, only reading. Vanessa's equity claim on the gym had been addressed by the premarital incorporation documents and a line-by-line accounting of the gym's growth, none of which had been funded by marital assets. The claim had not survived the first substantive hearing. Derek Sims had not renewed his training contract. He had not returned to the facility in any capacity. He had relocated to the eastern suburbs and updated his social media biography twice in the interim. The senior sales executive language remained, but the fitness content had gone quiet. Vanessa was working in corporate marketing in a freelance capacity, a smaller practice than she had left. Some of the mutual friends from the social circle she had built around those Saturday dinners had proved to be less proximate than she had expected. Her mother had called Kane once, briefly, to say she was sorry. He had thanked her and told her he hoped she was well, and it meant both things. There was a woman named Renata in Kane's life now. She was a physical therapist who had treated his hand injury 12 years ago, when the fracture had ended his career, and who had recently reached back out to offer a second opinion on a recurring tightness in the same hand that Raymond had been flagging. She had been direct about the structural issue, and had also been direct, at the end of the appointment, about the fact that she had thought about him over the years and had been glad to hear he was well. He had found that he appreciated directness more than he had at 31. They had dinner twice in the following weeks. She did not perform for him. He did not perform for her. He had learned at 31, when the hand broke, and the career ended in 3 months of enforced stillness, that the quality he most wanted from another person was presence that did not require an audience and did not go quiet when the room thinned out. Renata had that quality in full measure. He had not always known what to call it. He knew it now. On a Tuesday morning in late spring, Kane arrived at the gym before dawn. He wrapped his hands in the quiet of the locker room, the particular smell of it, the particular sound of the tape pulling from the roll, and walked out to the main floor. He worked the heavy bag alone for 30 minutes in the dark gym before the overhead lights came on and Raymond arrived and the first session of the day began. He moved through the combinations he had been working on for 30 years, and the bag took each one and absorbed it, and came back to him, steady and patient, the way good training equipment always did. The only man worth worrying about was the one he had not trained yet. Everything else was preparation. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.